And welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm Keith Downey, your host. And for anyone who missed the latest updates on Guadalupe Radio Network's 2025 car raffle drawing, it has been rescheduled for Tuesday, February 25th. Inclement weather across the country, unfortunately, has caused delays in delivering some of your tickets out there to get to Midland, Texas, which is where we're going to be drawing the winner on Tuesday, February 25th. So we'll put that in your calendars for Tuesday, and it's going to be a blast. So, but this actually gives us more time to kind of tackle some of the most topical headlines that's been happening over this week that we couldn't get to before, of course, but now we'll kind of see and view from the lens of the Catholic faith. So the headline in question that we're discussing is the USCCB filed a lawsuit. This was on Tuesday, February 18th, claiming the Trump administration's sudden suspension of refugee resettlement funding is unlawful, violating congressional authority, and leaving the church unable to support thousands of legally admitted refugees. Now, before we get too far into this, a couple things. If you have a comment or you want to add to this conversation, we're actually going to be opening up the phone lines because we want to hear from your perspective as well. The number you can call into is 877-757-9424. I'll give that number out maybe once or a couple times in case you need that number once again. But so, I mean, I guess to kind of get more into the conversation, we're actually blessed to have Julie Carrick join us once again. Good morning. Welcome back, Julie.
Good morning. This is a great discussion I think we're headed into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I'm kind of torn on this. I don't know about you, because obviously our faith, and even stated in the catechism, and I jotted it down here, that's paragraph 2241, basically says, like, hey, the more prosperous nations are obliged, to the extent they are able to welcome the foreigner and search for, security and the means of livelihood, so on and so forth. And then the other side of me is like, well, what? It's tough because we're getting money. The church is getting money from the government, and should we be getting money from the government? So there's just it raises a lot of questions and red flags about how the church is funding these missions. And what is your perspective on all of this?
I'm with you in that I can see it from both sides. And I guess I'll play devil's advocate first, right? Yes. You know me, it's Friday. My husband teases that I'm No Filter Friday, Julie. And that's okay. The reality is it is black and white, but it's black and white. Okay. We have two sides here. And one, of course, the catechism teaches that those countries that are able should assist. And if we look at the word country and say, make that personal, if we personally can assist, then we should assist. But we don't have a government. Once we take money, we're under their authority. And I mean, we saw a very bad example of that when the pandemic happened, didn't we? Where churches stopped having mass. I mean, you could not go to mass. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go into that again. No. And then the responsibility, and this is what I think is important, is there are rights of immigrants and there are responsibilities of immigrants. And it's interesting how even from a Catholic perspective, we can take something as powerful as the Word of God and use it to make an example. And the one that is always used when we talk about immigration is when Jesus and Mary and Joseph fled into Egypt and they were there as refugees. Absolutely. Were they sparing the life of Jesus Christ? Absolutely. Were we grateful that they were allowed into Egypt? Absolutely. But we don't really know how they lived while they were there. And what we do know is they didn't stay there because they eventually came back to Nazareth, right? He was raised in Nazareth as a Nazarene. They didn't live their whole life in Egypt once they went there. They went, they had the provision and care and things that they needed until they came back home. And home had to change for them to come back home, right? The slaughter of the children
Right.
had to be over, those things. And so I look at it from that and perspective, not the or perspective. It's the and. And I think when it comes to immigration, the refugees, or the immigrant, if you will, responsibilities, when we look at that in the catechism, is that immigrants should respect the country's laws and heritage. And so many
Yep.
times as people come into this country, they're coming with what they know. And so what they know is how they want things to be when they get here, but it's very different. And we don't change another country to come into it. And the other part that is very defined in the same section of the catechism that you mentioned is that the immigrants should assist in carrying civic burden. We don't we don't go to another country and simply take. We have to participate in that and not just be a burden. And I know a lot of times when I talk about this, people are they get a little upset with me and they're like, yeah, but what do you know about it? Have you ever lived in a foreign country? Well, actually, I have. My husband and I lived in Germany for 5 years. 3 years of that was under what is called the Status of Forces Agreement, where we were there as U.S. citizens on U.S. soil because of the military. But when Kurt finished his enlistment with the U.S. Army, he did what was called a overseas separation. So he separated from military service, and we became civilians living in a foreign country. And in order for us to stay there legally, we had to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. We had to prove that we could financially be able to be there. We had to prove our employment. We had to have it's called an Erlaubnis in our passport put in so that we were there as legal, able to work and provide for ourselves. Otherwise, they would not have allowed us to stay. Now, that was us being in that foreign country. On the other side of it, what I saw was my mother-in-law, and I want you to hear this very clearly when I hear about the plight of immigrants coming here. There are legal ways of doing it, and there are illegal ways of doing it. And my mother-in-law, whose father was taken from their home when she was a little girl during the Second World War, her father was taken from their home in the middle of dinner and was taken to a concentration camp where he eventually died. Her mother and her sisters were on what was called the Death March. They lived through that part of the war as on foot, no home, literally walking for months and months, going from place to place, having to find food. I mean, this is my mother-in-law. This is not decades and decades and generations ago. This is my mother-in-law who's still with us, right? That's how she lived in Germany. When she came to the United States, after meeting my father-in-law, who was in Germany with the military years later, she came to this country legally, became a citizen. She and my father-in-law began a business, built up that business, supported themselves. And so I've seen it from both directions. One of the most painful things that I witnessed at the border here in Mexico was many years ago. We were there for a little visit. We drove into the country and we're driving back in through Arizona. And a lady came up to our car as we were waiting to go through the port coming back into the U.S. And she was holding in her arms a baby, and she kept saying, take my baby, take my baby. And she wanted us to take her baby with us into this country. But when I looked closer, I realized it wasn't a real baby. It was a baby doll that she had made look like it was real, and she was selling them at the border. So she was making money at the border, but making you think, like, who needs to come across this border? So I struggle with it. I really do, because there are legal and illegal ways. So,
I know it is so challenging. And then, the way it talks, a country that can essentially afford to help people, and we're at $36.22 trillion in debt. Are we really that wealthy enough to take in all of these people. It's it. And now that there's 6,700 refugees that have been legally admitted and assigned to the USCCB care are now at risk. It reminds me of the whole situation with IVF, with all of these frozen embryos. Like, what do you do now that we are at this situation? It's come to light. It's just we're at a crossroads, and I feel like the only thing that at least many of us can do is pray and fast. I think at the end of the day, would you agree, Julie?
Absolutely, to pray and fast, and to be the people that we are called to be with regard to perhaps tithing. I mean, we need to look at, are we really under the government handout, or do we need to be the hand up for people who are already here? And there are a lot of jobs, there are a lot of positions that are paid positions that are funded because of government. And is that right? Or are we supposed to be doing things that, not under the control of the government, but truly doing what we're supposed to do in order to help people? And I feel like the more we do as proper tithing and doing what we're called to do, and not so much, and Keith, you nailed it when you said, governments who are in a better position to help should help, but we are trillions of dollars in debt. Debt is not helping. That is not us helping. We are not able to help because you don't live on a credit card. You don't live on a credit card. Just saying. Never dig out of that.
No, and thank you for mentioning like us tithing. I think that is also another important way to help, obviously, from praying and fasting, like helping the situation at a local standpoint. Wow, my goodness, thank you so much, Julie, for helping us break down that headline this morning. And if you're just tuning in now, remember Tuesday, February 25th, that is when we're going to be drawing the winner of the 2025 Guadalupe Radio Network car raffle. So once again, put that in your calendar for Tuesday, February 25th. And remember, keep your phone close by because you might be the one getting that phone call if you bought tickets. But that is it for Morning Joy, where truth matters. We'll see you bright and early Monday morning, 6 a.m. Central. We're going to go transition on over to the After Show Clubhouse. Search GRN online on YouTube or Rumble. And God bless, and make it a joyful weekend. We'll see you.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.